ever had a dreams that you had?
Welcome, beautiful souls, to another transformative episode of Big Inner Child Energy Podcast with your host, licensed therapist and entrepreneur strategist, Mikah Miller. Today, we embark on a journey deep into the realms of our inner child, exploring stories that shape our adult lives. Get ready for candid conversations, unfiltered insights, and actionable strategies to fuel your personal and professional growth. Let's laugh, learn, and embrace the boundless energy of our inner child together. This is Big Inner Child Energy, where healing meets humor and transformation intertwines with authenticity. Welcome to your playground of success.
Hello, incredible souls, and welcome back to Big Inner Child Energy, the podcast where we not only embrace the magic of our inner child, but also uncover the stories of successful individuals exploring how their childhood experiences paved the way for their remarkable journeys. I'm your host, Mikah Miller, and I am once again thrilled to dive into yet another inspiring episode with you. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to take a moment to continue to express my gratitude for each and every one of you that support and engage in this podcast. Your engagement means the world to me, and I am so honored to have you as part of our growing community. So if you are new here, welcome to the Playground of Success. Now, without further ado, let's just jump into this episode of Big Inner Child Energy. I have a very, very, very special guest, an individual that needs no introduction because her gift will effortlessly speak for itself once she starts talking. But she is a licensed social worker, a consultant for major corporations, and a powerhouse speaker, and an amazing songstress. Erin Jones. Erin, welcome to the Playground.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love that. The playground of success. Believe. Yeah, I love
We're all
that.
just big kids and grown-up bodies.
For sure. I definitely am. I constantly have the conversation with my friends and my daughter. Like, am I ever going to grow up? And probably not. Like, I'm about to hit what they classify as middle age this year. So, like, I'll be 45. And I'm still,
If that's aging, then let us all age.
okay. Yes.
I feel like that's part of the problem. It's like, who said we had to really grow up?
Because we're always trying to escape the adult thing. So it's just like incorporate it in your life, and like something that I've told clients, people that I've had personal conversations with is always make time for play. Always. Like you have to. Yeah.
You know, and one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show is because we had so many similarities. And it's so funny because I always try to remember, and we talked about this, like, how did I know we met online, but who? And it was a mutual friend. And I think you had shared a group for grief work, I believe, on Instagram. And you were in Cartersville. So I was like, oh my God, a Black therapist in Cartersville doing a grief group. I have to share this. So I reshared it. We became friends on Instagram, and it's kind of like we just like connected ever since. And that was years ago. So if you guys think you can't meet people online and network, you are wrong. Most of my therapist friends have come from social media. But you know, just discovering who you are, like you're a preacher's kid, I'm a preacher's kid. You know, we've had so many similarities as far as dating, as far as, you know, being single mothers, as being therapists, and having this passion for helping people. Like, what were you like as a kid? Like, what was your childhood like that you think really just kind of helped shape this wonderful woman that you are today?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny because like I remember when we were talking about doing this, we were talking about, you know, it's Women's Month, Women's History Month, social work, it's social work month also. And just talking about like, even at the time of the year where we are having, you know, this conversation. And I've been very reflective because I did get into grief work because of my own personal journey with grief. I lost my mom when I was 24, and I lost my father when I was 34. And when I do grief work or I do grief speaking, I talk more about my mom's death because it was much more traumatic. It was first. I was so much younger. I hadn't really tapped into my therapist part of myself. Like even when I got my MSW, I had no desire for licensure or to like I didn't know like really what I was gonna do per se. And I think that came from like the exhaustion of school because I was a single mom. I had my daughter when I was 19. I worked full-time, like 11 to 8. I will never forget that shift. I would go to school from 8 until 10:45, go and work from 11 to 8. And then sometimes, depending upon if there were a course offering, I might take the class after I got off from work. So, during those early years, like of my daughter's life, my parents had Madison a lot
Yeah.
because, I mean, I was trying to knock it out the park. And I was, dealing with shame. So I was trying to earn, from coming up in church,
Yeah. Yeah.
being an unwedded mom, really young. And I was trying to, earn my keep, so to speak, even though my parents never made me feel that way. But as a child, I was very animated, very fun, very silly. Y'all can move us down. It's time for me to sing. And I would stand up like on our hearth. We had like a fireplace and it was like a little stage. And or that's what I called it. But it was actually it was the hearth in front of the fireplace. And I would stand up there and I would sing and just, perform and just a jovial. I was fun and
Yeah.
silly.
It's interesting because you touched on like the shame of being a single mom. I had the same thing, and I was much older than you when I had my son,
Mhm.
and it still was there. And
Sure.
growing up in the church, there's an image. There is an image, right?
Of
There's
course.
a lot of things that are put on you as far as the kids go. How do you feel like that has kind of affected you now with like even being able to put yourself out there now?
Well, thankfully, because of my spiritual background and an amazing therapist and working through my stuff, like I just don't have that shame about it anymore because I've started to really embrace my humanity and that sometimes we make decisions that aren't the best. Not that my child is a mistake, none of that stuff. Just like, I was living life, and when I look at, my upbringing, it's something about the church that, we've talked about before and I've talked about in other spaces, is that, like, we do really well sometimes with following the rules of the spiritual piece, but just practicality.
Right.
Like, talks about sex. I didn't know what my period was. I can remember, like, sitting on the toilet and thinking, "Oh my god, I gotta tell my parents, like, I think I have cancer." And I was 13 years old
Yeah.
and was oblivious. And it was traumatic because I'm like, "What is this?" And I should also say that I'm also a sexual abuse survivor. So imagine, like, oh my God, what is this? Like something happened. And by the time I had gotten to that age, it had been a while since I had like maybe like 3 years, 3 or 4 years since anything else had happened. But of course, that's always in the back of your mind. And shame from that because I'm bad. And at that time I had not disclosed any of that to anybody. I never disclosed it to my dad. I disclosed it to my mother. I was about 18 or 19, so
Mm.
around the same time that I got pregnant.
Yeah.
So I never told, and just with all of that shame and internalizing from a very young age, because if I think back in my mind, the first instance I can think of like the sexual abuse piece, I was probably 5 or 6. And I think back to that and I was like, I grappled with that on my own
Yeah.
for 5 years
By
at
yourself.
least.
Yeah.
Like, the things that I have experienced, they have built a certain resilience, like the resilience of a child. I mean, my story is a testament to that,
Yeah.
just how children can, power through. And then I think about, what we know as therapists
Mm.
about where children are developmentally.
Right.
So I'm thinking it's my fault. So I internalize this as I am bad or this is bad. And I knew nobody I was never threatened not to tell or whatever, but there was just a knowing.
Yeah.
And I had things going on, at home. My dad was the best dad on earth, but he struggled, with alcohol addiction, which caused a lot of tension. So kids are reading at all times. So it's like telling anybody we got too much going on. I had already metered that at 5 or 6 years old. Like it's too much going on. And if I say something else, then it's gonna upset my mom or it's gonna upset my dad, or it's gonna, we might not get to go and play with my cousins anymore or get to go and do all of these things. So I'm like shouldering all of this. And I look back now, the inner child piece is so key for me because I have to go back and pick little Erin up often and put her on my hip and say, "Girl, you are such a big girl and you did so well." And then just telling her, you could have, I wish you felt like you could have told, or whatever, but you did what you knew to do,
Yeah.
at that time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that inner child piece is big for me.
but you're an entrepreneur, right? You're an entrepreneur, you work in the hospital, you wear all these hats. I mean, like singing, like
Mhm.
everybody's go-to friend, like you wear all these hats. And so you're talking about this 5-year-old that's literally navigating the feelings and emotions of all these adults around you, all these
Mhm.
scenarios, finding like at 5, 6, 7, right? So it's like, how does that even impact you as an adult trying to run a business, and trying to be a mom to another adult? Like, at 5 years old, you're running all these different things, but does that make you try to account for people's feelings even today? Like, where are you with like boundaries and stuff like that?
Honey, my boundary journey, like, as in having them, is evolving
Yeah.
still. I was very much, I know we talk a lot about in the therapy world, if you talk about anxiety, you talk about fight or flight. I was a fawner big time because I wanted to please. That's what got me attention. I did well in school. I could sing. I was reading very early. So that performance and being easy
Yeah.
and not expressing my needs, so that affected me in friendship.
Yeah.
It affected me in dating relationships. Sometimes even with Madison, like overcompensating, like
Oh, yeah.
anticipating her feelings and not, sometimes just being uncomfortable. I didn't like her being mad at me
Yeah.
at times. You know what I mean? And so I had to work through that and just be like, no, like we both got to sit with this
Mhm.
discomfort because if we don't, like, she's gonna always think that it's gonna be like jump and how high and all that kind of stuff, and I can't roll like that because I don't wanna enable her
Yeah.
in that way, and I wanna be supportive, of her, and I just thank God for giving me awareness, Micah. I promise, like,
Yeah.
for as much as sometimes we feel like, there were a lot of things that happened in church that were wrong, and there were,
Yeah.
be
Oh, yeah.
clear.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the faith part of it and, like, it's going to get better, and, one thing my mom was always real serious about was how we spoke about things, our life. Like, that was like a spankable offense in our
Yeah.
house to be talking negative or saying what we can't do. And my mom used to always make me quote Philippians 4:13. I'm talking about if she had just whooped my butt or whatever, and I'm on my way to the bus stop, like I still had to quote that. She'd look out out of the door and she would say, Erin Michelle. And I turned, I can do all things through Christ
Yeah.
that strengthens me. That it
Right.
or whatever. And what I had to learn, that really became a part,
Yeah.
of who I was, which was helpful. But I also had to learn that I can do all the things, but maybe I shouldn't do all of the things. I don't have to do
Yeah.
all of the things and, all of that. So that's a lesson that's been coming to me. I feel like boundary wise, I sucked at boundaries before because so much of my worth was just, with helping people and what I got out of being needed and accepted and all of those kinds of things. So my job, I didn't know that on a conscious level. I wasn't trying, oh well, let me do this to be to be this person's friend. But there were situations. And I mean, I could definitely speak about it from romantic relationships, but I always ended up in bullying kind of situations where like people knew that they were hurting me or hurting my feelings, or they saw that I was tenderhearted and they would like manipulate that or use that to get multiple chances with, whatever. And so like in family, in friendships and romantic relationships.
Mhm.
So that really, I mean, that being the easy kid, like I've done memes, several times that say, hey, check on your good kid, the
Oh,
kid
yeah.
that doesn't get in trouble or whatever, because they're probably managing something on their own that they
Probably
need
got
help with.
anxiety because I know, like, when you're the easy kid or you're the smart kid or the doesn't give me any problems kid, everything's you're in your head all day long. So you're always
All day long.
always weighing pros and cons. You're always trying to figure out how to, make sure you're not ruffling feathers and do this right and do that right. So it's like you grow up with, like a world of anxiety, boundary issues, all types of things. Now and as being therapists, we're showing people tools and how to do things and how to
Yeah.
express yourself, and that vulnerability is okay and that things are okay. So with kind of not getting a lot of, you know, because in the Black community, it's just you just don't talk about your family business. You just don't
Right.
talk about being depressed. You don't talk about being sad. You don't talk
Yeah,
about
you better get in there and depress them dishes. Like
right.
things that we and in our in as Black people too, like our first response is either anger or it's humor.
Yep.
Those that's where we dwell emotionally.
Hmm.
Either I'm gonna you up or we gonna laugh about it and like make light of it. So I don't really have to deal with the weight of how this is really making me feel. And so a conclusion that I have come to is like the more that I heal and the healthier that I get emotionally, I begin to see like how suppressed the world is around us and how suppressed people are, particularly in the church, because the term spiritual bypassing is such a real thing. And that's what our parents were doing when they would say, well, we just gonna pray about it. I don't want to talk about it. I got too much going on. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to deal with this. And I mean, not to say that they didn't, because I think about my mother now, especially, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I used to think about all that she dealt with guilt
Hmm.
because I felt guilty for needing her, for all of the things, getting pregnant, kinda changing, like, the dynamic of our family. Like, I felt all of those things, and that was nothing. Like, when I told my mom I was pregnant, she was like, "It's okay," and I'm thinking, "Where have you been all my life? Where have you been?" So that too is why her death was traumatic, because we had just started to hit the sweet spot of like understanding one another, and like this age right now, like now Madison knows, oh my God, like you have sense. Like, you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And our relationship, I would say, was much more open and
Right.
better than mine and my mom's, especially like in adolescence, because I was very serious about that. Cause like my hallmark of, "Oh, I'm doing a good job parenting," like, when I was like, "Yes, I'm doing good," is when she got her cycle,
Yeah.
she was laughing. She called me into the bathroom and like, "Mama, I think I just got my period." I was like, "Oh, thank God." Like, she wasn't sitting in there ruminating over, like, "How am I gonna present this?" and all this kinda stuff. Because I got her that little book from, the caring and keeping of you. So she
Yeah.
knew about breast buds and pubic hair and, all of those kinds of things. But that was the compensation for what I did not, receive. And just always kind of feeling lost. But because I presented as so smart,
Yeah.
um, I think people, even in my spiritual life, miss how jacked up I was, even behind my
Mhm.
mom's death. Girl, we buried her on a Sunday. She died May 12th. We buried her on a Sunday, which was the 17th. I went to Mayminster on the 18th. Mayminster, not just back to school, but I went to
Yes.
a
Yeah.
Mayminster class.
Grinding it out for heavy, heavy, heavy.
20 weeks of information in 2 to 3 weeks.
But
Yeah.
you touched on giving Madison the thing that you necessarily wish you would have known or had, or like that's
Mhm.
kind of what it is. Like when you have kids, I always tell people like when you have kids, that is when you are literally almost re-rating yourself, right?
Yes,
So you always
absolutely.
say, obviously your kids are not, an extension of you, but you
Right.
find yourself raising your inner child as you're raising your son. Your darkest time in your life is going to be the hardest. You're gonna have a lot of transference issues with your kid. Middle school for me was mine. My son is in sixth grade. So like,
Mhm.
like trying to prepare him the way I didn't feel I was prepared with, sex conversations, bully conversations, puberty conversations, like things I
Sure.
could not talk about. Did you find yourself, um, my parents say I'm oversharing, but did you find yourself oversharing with Madison or really trying to prepare her for the dark times?
Yeah, like totally. I mean, your parents are gauging it as oversharing from people who didn't share at all. So
Yeah.
that's already like off, like kind of like off. Like, no, like they need to know, like to a certain level. Think about how many things we went into blind, just so blind. And it's not a matter of, it's not natural. Like if God created us with our minds, our brains, and how they work and what we know about,
Right.
again, developmental psychology and different things like that. Like some of this stuff, it's normal to feel this. And so
Mhm.
then you got, people telling you, well, that's your carnal nature. Well, yeah, well, I'm in this carnal body. So we hold the treasure in what? Earthen vessels.
Right.
So like here we are, and we don't know how to really navigate these conversations. And if you come from a school of thought, like our parents probably did, where you really don't talk about anything, and you gotta like it's so deep because it's so based in white supremacy, and we don't share our feelings, and whatever happens in this house, like you said, stays in this dysfunctional house. Like there's no outside influence, and everything is looked at as an enemy. Everything is demonized. Everything
Yeah.
and of the devil.
Yeah.
And like that, I already had anxiety. So I was already scary.
Same.
So hearing even some of the things that we're taught, they talk about oversharing. Y'all don't want to talk about sex that's happening every day, but you will tell me about hellfire and brimstone, which is terrifying. It's scary. Like, so help me understand. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, Michael, because I prayed. I was like in a really just sad space at the end of like October 2022. No, like like November, December,
Mhm.
2022. And I was just like, I had like an attitude with God, to be honest. And I was just like, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want from me?
Mhm.
Like, why can't I sustain like extended periods of joy and happiness? I used to be happier, or so I thought, when I was depressed, I could just like move through stuff. But I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, like, what I'm even supposed to be doing. I know that there are things that you've given me to do. I want to do them. I want to be pleasing, in your sight. Of course, me, especially being a people, of course, I'm a God pleaser. A God pleaser who feels like he's always mad at me.
Right.
And, that piece that he's so angry all the time. And I'm thinking as I began to live, I'm like, well, surely the God, like, I know he has standards, and I know he wants me to live like this holy lifestyle and all these kinds of things. I get that because he wants me to get to Jeremiah 29:11. He wants the plans that he has for me. He wants to see me win, all these kind of things. But I spent a great majority of my life, and I'm not talking about as a child. I mean, within the last, probably, I've only been really set free from thinking he's always mad at me. Maybe 7 years. Maybe.
That comes with the even we talked about this yesterday though, like about just our spiritual journeys in general and realizing how big our God is and like really exploring the depths of even other beliefs and other things to really come to this point where you realize God is an empathetic God, right?
Mhm.
It's not
It
all
has to be.
right. It's hello. Hello. But look, to deal with me, you have to.
Big tears.
No, and it's interesting because you do grow up thinking like if you do this, God's gonna be mad.
Oh
If
my
you do this,
God.
God's gonna be happy. Right. And it's like so you have to really kind of just go through life and realize, no, God, like you said, He wants you to find what the plan for your life is. And you can't have that plan without the dark times. You can't have light without dark. So it's like everything that you've been through, you hear it in church, but it doesn't resonate until you really go through it and look at each stage of your life and say,
Mhm.
God, I was amazing at 5. I was amazing at 10. I went through all these things. I became even more amazing at 20, even more amazing at 30. And so it's like everything that you've been through has really just kind of shaped, your life.
Mhm. At the end, when I was in my sad period, I prayed and I said, God, I want to have opportunity to go into faith spaces, particularly with Black people
Mhm.
in church, which is where that would turn out to be most of the time. And I really want to talk to them about the nuts and bolts of counseling
Yeah.
and what that really is and how to link scripture to like, this is what I do. Like, I'm not in here to tell you you're crazy. I'm not in here just to know your business. Like, you are going back. If you go to church, you're going, say 2 hours, you're in there for 2 hours to deal with the rest of your life. You got a few people that pick up Bible studies that are or people that are involved in other ministries, but like how much time do you spend, excuse me, unearthing um all of the things like the scripture that says, be not conformed to the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, how do you do that? Like if you're going back, like say you are that saved spouse and the other spouse is unsaved and the environment at home hasn't really changed that much. And I mean, I have to admit, my dad struggled with his addiction, but church was an addiction to a certain, it was an escape for
Yeah.
my mom, like, and thank God, it wasn't anything else.
Right.
And she taught us a lot. And the looking back over my life now, she really progressed in some areas. Just she was way ahead of her time, because even though it's interesting that I'd suffered through all of those things by myself, but she also gave me 2 books when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I was reading, she said, by the time I was like 3 and a half or 4. And she was at home with me for a period of time too. And I can remember during that time, she always had really pretty hands and really pretty nails, and I get complimented on my nails and my hands all the time. And so I can remember like rubbing her nails like this, and I was like, "I love your nails so much, like that I want fingernails like this." She was like, "Well, pray and maybe you'll get them or whatever." And she was just a woman of faith. This is a woman who our dog got ran over. This dog was nearly dead. And we were literally in our driveway laying hands on this dog. And my brother, like, he's older, he's 8 years older than me. He said, I'm looking around. He said, I'm embarrassed, like, oh my God, like she is praying for this dog. But Truth lived for a long time, like after that. And so the things that she instilled with us as far as faith, and the 2 books that she gave me, one was called, and this is the early 80s, guys. So the one book was called About the Handicap. So, and the other one, and I actually found them online, and I need to buy them before they get gone, like obsolete, because I doubt they're still in print. But, and the other one was about dying.
Mm.
So, yes. So she was always exposing us to, and I tell people all the time, my mother didn't have a formal degree, but if
Yeah.
she would have been an educator or either a social worker. I have no doubt. And so she worked with like Head Start.
Mhm.
She was the curriculum coordinator for Head Start. So she traveled around and helped people build these programs. And it was so funny when she passed away. There are CEUs or continuing
Yeah.
education credits that preschool workers have to do if they're licensed by the state. And I saw all this stuff on attachment theory. She was so fascinated by all of those things. She also, the daycare where she worked, it was a United Way center.
Mhm.
So they accepted like the vouchers, and you could have anybody in there, from someone who was from a very affluent family all the way to people who were more, in poverty and different
Mhm.
things like that, foster care, all of that. So, and I have a picture that I'm gonna send you. I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's so sweet. She's sitting on the floor with kids, and it's all kids of like different colors, like races, and she's right there, and it's so her. And she was so insane, and I was like, "God, then you would go and give her the wherewithal, God, give her the wherewithal to give me this book, because my whole career was about
I
dying,
love it.
and then working with those who have differences, because it was a little boy in there, and he had like he looked like he maybe had cerebral palsy or something,
Mhm.
and it just tells you that some people are different and da 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 da. So she was teaching me about diversity, equity, and inclusion in 1981, 82,
Mhm.
83,
Mhm.
84. And then how I've been able to look at it now, though, because I idolized my mom too,
Yeah.
and
Same.
just
Same.
saw her like as perfect and all of the things. But then I saw her humanity, because she saw all of this in the world, but she missed it here in her house. You know what I mean? And I was just like, wow. And I thought about when I told her, like, how she probably had to grapple with that. Like, how did I miss that? Or how did I, or if she knew
Yeah.
and didn't protect or act on it, because maybe she was right. Because I'll tell you this too, and it makes me wonder about her
Mhm.
own history.
Yeah.
She testified in a lot of sexual abuse cases. Like,
Mm.
she would be able to determine it, because she had like a lot of, and I mean, my mom was an intercessor too, so
Yeah. Yeah.
how that goes. Just showing you all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. You trying to sneak and do stuff, and honey, you know how that goes. And so, like she, just an eye that was open, and she was way ahead of her time, and I say that. So then her loss was just
Yeah.
gargantuan to our family and to me especially. I mean, not more than anybody else, but, it was just a lot.
Yeah. But it's
Mhm,
interesting because our moms are very similar, right?
mhm.
Your mom was very open and understanding. Like my mom wasn't like the Bible thumping, you can't listen to NWA type of preacher's mom. We all had
Yeah,
demons. I didn't have that. So I was thankful that she was not that. But I think as you go through your inner child journey and you start healing, there's a point in there where you become empathetic and compassionate about your parents, right?
Yeah.
What you're speaking to is like seeing the mom, the human mom, all the different facets of our parents. And like, then you look at yourself and you realize, God, is that where I got all this? Like you see them, you see yourself in them
Yeah,
a
they
lot more
mirror, like,
now, like my mom she started off with the youth ministry. That was her thing. So she was working with kids and in the youth
my
ministry. And, so like people always like, well, you work with kids. It's like, well, yeah, I grew up seeing my mom
sure.
be so great with kids. And I used to always say she was a preacher, but she could preach, but everybody could understand. Some places you go, preachers preach, you can't understand as a kid, nothing they're saying. She always made it relatable. So I'm just thinking about how much pressure that is too, right? Because we talked about like, did that kind of help you hinder you from putting yourself out there and you idolize your mom? I did too. I used to tell people I thought my mom was a celebrity. So with that being said, do you feel like obviously you've kind of turned into your mom, social worker, right? You work in grief, you work with kids, you advocate, you do all these things.
All while trying to avoid that
Right.
110,000%. I'm never helping people. It
But
gets
you
on my
also saw your
nerves.
mom be a mom. You also saw your
Yeah,
mom be a wife. You also saw your mom be a homemaker. You also saw your mom,
right.
all these things in the community. And, growing up, seeing that in your parents, it's so much pressure. It's like, whoa, how do I encompass all of that into one? And I think,
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to the anxiety as an adult, how you hold yourself back from being a speaker because your parents were such great dynamic speakers. How do you feel like any parts of your journey you felt like you couldn't live up to, your mom's journey?
All the time, because that was always because I look so much like her, like, to the
Yeah.
point I look a lot like her, I sound like her, like, to the point my cousin called after she died, and she was like, let Uncle Louis answer the phone because this is too
Yeah.
much."
Yeah.
Like, but definitely that, because the expectation was there, and then I always drew when she died, it was worse because, that Elisha,
Mhm.
the mantle. Yeah, and a lot of mantles fell on me too, not just the work that she did in ministry, but anxiety,
Yeah.
depression,
Oh,
things that
yeah.
I look back now and I recognize, oh, she was irritable and screaming all the time. And I wasn't that way. My personality took on more like my dad.
Yeah.
He was a lot more laid back. And even when his brothers made remarks at his funeral, they described him as the peacemaker, and he was a middle child too. So I've got like a lot of both of them.
Yeah.
But as far as like with my mom, definitely I remember hosting an event that she had hosted before. And a lot of my efforts in the early days to do that was so I did not want people to forget her.
Mhm.
Like I felt like this charge within myself to like never let anybody forget her. It was frustrating when I was at church. And I know now, of course, you gotta consider 24 years old. I was a baby.
Baby. Yeah.
And like looking back, now I was just like, I can remember times being in church and I'd be like,
Mhm.
how are they praising God? Like in my head, like my world, like, I'm looking at her empty seat in the pulpit because
Mhm.
I was a member. My mom was a founding member of the church where we were members. Like, I was 7 years old, 6 or 7. My sister was still in a carrier. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And, yeah, I stayed there for a really long time because it was a sense of devotion to her, not even necessarily always to God. It was just like this, I'm a part of her legacy. And so like this is something that meant a lot to her or whatever. But oddly enough, like we say how we run from our parents, I left that church at the same age that she left her home church. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I really am, I really have followed in some of those footsteps and broken generational curses.
By saying
And
heal those parts of them, by
yes,
changing
absolutely.
changing things and breaking those generational curses and talking
Yeah,
about mental health and, pouring into our kids in a different type of way. Not that they didn't do it to us, they
right.
more of the morals and the values and stuff like that.
Sure.
Whereas, like the morals and the values help, but not as much when you're dealing with folks that have no morals and values, right? How do I
Right.
navigate that? So, you were talking about your mom, and I know that her birthday is coming up, right?
Mhm.
So, like,
Saturday.
how do you, for people that are dealing with grief too, and lost their parents young, how are you like navigating those emotions, or how do you navigate those emotions in these types of anniversaries and birthdays and things like that?
Yeah, so it has grown. My relationship with that has changed like over the years. So, like I said, in the beginning, it was like about not forgetting her.
Yeah,
And so I would it always falls like the death anniversary always falls around Mother's Day.
yeah,
Um and my father died May 11th, my mother
yeah.
died May 12th. Let me put that out there. And then my little sister's birthday is May 13th.
Wow.
So it's a lot. And
Yeah,
she used to deal with like a lot of anxiety,
yeah,
like around her birthday and, different things like that, probably feeling guilty for celebrating sometimes and just different things like that. So, with those things, like at first, I used to always she had breast cancer. And
mhm,
so I used to always do like the Susan G. Komen,
yeah,
the 5K would be in Atlanta at Atlantic stations. So I did that for about the first 3 or 4 years, and then, like, that 5th year or so, I can't remember exactly, I didn't feel the need to do that anymore, and I released myself. I felt like I had to, and, like, that's very natural, very normal
mhm,
part of, the journey. Um, and, like, now I celebrate it. Like, for example, I didn't know this until my brother told me, but he was talking to my Aunt Claire, which is my mom's last sister. She's the last sister that is
mhm,
living, and, she is very much like a second mom,
mhm.
to us. And I always asked me, even before my mom was a baby girl.
Yeah,
So, like, I was like, I don't know if I used to tell people all the time, I have great relationships with women because that was modeled before me. And I said, like, mom, I used to tell people I have 4 moms.
yeah,
And I was serious. When I was a little girl, I was like, I have 4 mamas, and, like, my Aunt Dot lived, like, down the road from us.
mhm,
Growing up, my Aunt Clara, who was, like, my second mom, her and my mom were together, like,
mhm,
she was next to the last girl and my mom, so they were, next to each other in the birth order. And
mhm,
then my Aunt Ruth, I stayed when my mom went back to work, I stayed at her house, so and then when I had Madison stayed with Stephanie, which is Aunt Ruth's daughter, like, it was,
yeah,
like, that kinda thing, so I always felt very loved and supported, like,
yeah,
particularly by mine. And so, like, throughout, conversation with my brother Dexter, my Aunt Clara told him that my mom had an opportunity to go to college or to go to school in DC, and I said, "It would be so funny if it was Howard," but of course, like, who knows where.
yeah,
She had the offer, to go, but my grandparents would not allow her to go.
mhm,
So she ended up going to, like, secretary school, and it could have been an affordability issue,
yeah,
but my aunt did say that my grandfather was very strict
mhm,
also. And so who knows why they didn't allow her? Maybe they were afraid,
right,
it's so much that goes on, and this was in the '60s and
mhm,
all of the things, and around the time for all of the freedom riders, all
yeah,
of the protests and everything in civil rights was going on, so I'm sure that they had
yeah,
their reasons. Um, but she wasn't able to go, and she had the aptitude to be able to go, but
yeah,
not maybe the finances or just them allowing her to go, I don't know. Well, I wanted to go to Tennessee State when I got out of school, and my parents told me no, and I don't know if it was fear
yeah,
or this is what my parents did, and so you can find a school to go to around here or, like, whatever the case. So, when Madison was little, um and God just showed me that she would live far away from me, like, at some point in her life. So, when it came time for her to go to Hampton, I was not surprised,
yeah,
and she was able to go. So, even that, like, I healed that from my mom, you know what I'm saying? Not even knowing this was a decision that I made because I knew it was best for her.
right,
And now, like, as we sit here right now, she is in Los Angeles, California, working with the LA Dodgers, which is my dad's favorite team. So it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm of the belief, like, they're up there talking to people or they're up
mhm,
there pulling some kind of strings or something because, like, there has to be something to
yeah,
that because what are the odds? And then the fellowship, she said that the first day or second day, they let them know like the actual numbers. There were 6,000 applicants for this position because it was on LinkedIn. And like you think about how many kids have sport degrees or like whatever across the nation. There were 6,000 applicants, close to 200. I can't remember the exact number of interviews, and they narrowed it to 14 fellows, and she was one of the 14, the only African American woman. And that kind of stuff has always happened, and it has always given me comfort and reassurance that I'm in the right place, that I'm on the right track, and I'm doing right by Madison, and I'm doing right by my family, and just that I'm in the right place. And for a person who always felt bad and who
Yeah.
always felt he knows that I need things that extreme to say to me, I am with you, and those kind of things.
And I'm
So,
proud of you. Like I'm
yeah.
like just even I'm proud of you. Like I think aren't you going to California this weekend?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then this is opening weekend. She had already told me, she said, Mama, I didn't realize, it's gonna be opening weekend. It's gonna be super busy for me. Girl, why she up on my mom's birthday?
Wow.
So yeah, so we're gonna go to the beach probably, because that was my mom's favorite place.
Yeah.
And like you just have to know, like, I'll
Yeah.
send you this picture that I have of Madison and my mom on my mom's last vacation at Myrtle Beach before um, you know, she passed.
Even with the grief, it sounded like you leaned into the things your mom loved and celebrating her and honoring her. A lot of people kind of steer away from, or they don't want to see, or they want to hear, or they want to, and they tend to try to not remember, and I think it sounds like you've
Mhm.
chosen to lean in and celebrate. And I think that does actually work better than trying to avoid because you can't
Yeah, because the avoidance,
survive.
because here's the thing, all of that is still there.
Oh
Whether
yeah,
you acknowledge those feelings or not, like, they are there. And
exactly.
I think compartmentalization has its place where you put the stuff right there, but you can't leave it there forever
Nope.
because it's gonna come back. It's gonna show up in some other way, and you're gonna have a meltdown. And I just knew myself well enough to know. Oh, like, and because I had anxiety, it made me wanna learn more about the grief and what I was experiencing. Because I always thought, well, if I knew, then I would be in a good situation. And you have to think too, my mom didn't tell us she was terminal, and I know that she knew she was,
Yeah,
but she didn't tell us that.
yeah,
And I was pissed for years about that. But I also know myself at 24 years old, and she did exactly what she was supposed to do.
yeah, yeah.
I graduated a year to the day with my bachelor's a year to the day that she died. She died May 12th of '04. I graduated May 12th of '05.
Mm,
And that's what I'm saying. Like, all through my life, God has it's always been some kind of very specific God wink to say, "Do not doubt that I'm with you." And I have to keep that. I mean, I have to hold on, to those things because at that time I needed things that specific because I was so crushed and heartbroken. And because I never really saw her display that
yeah,
sadness and, because we just soldier on or whatever. I was like, I can't fall apart. Like I immediately went into little mom mode. Madison turning 25 was triggering for me because I didn't have a mom at 25. And I was just like, oh my God, like she's had me longer than I had my own mom.
mhm,
Like, that's so weird,
yeah,
but and I mean, I'm so much better about my health. I check on myself.
mhm,
My mom was not good at self-care. She was amazing to everybody else. But I mean, typical things that we hear,
yeah.
and so I had a lot of health anxiety. Like, I would have my hand in my shirt, like sometimes one little pain in my breast, and I'm like, you know,
That's true. I mean, like you said, we become your parents' dreams are for you to be better than they were. My dad always
yeah,
said, "I would just wish for you to be better than me." I always tell
yeah,
my son, "I just want you to be better and to navigate life better than I did." And so it's like
right,
you're doing that, your daughter's gonna do that. And I know my child gonna be therapist 4.0,
right.
So it's like, but I know one thing, me and Erin can talk. We can talk for
Yeah, we can.
hours. But we will
I
not
go to
put y'all through
brunch,
that.
but by the time we leave, it's dinner time.
Okay, by the time
Like,
we leave brunch, it's dinner, they cleaning up tables. Okay. So we will not do that to y'all today, okay? We may even do a part 2 or something, but
Yeah, I'd
one
love
thing I do
that.
wanna at least I always wanna end with, even when I work with kids, because we could get deep in sessions with kids. I always wanna end on a happy note or leave them feeling good. So I wanna kinda talk about just, like, just memories of your childhood real quick. So we're gonna do, like, a rapid fire question section. I'm
Okay.
throw some stuff at you, and you have to just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay.
So what was your favorite cartoon growing up?
Um, like anything with the Looney Tunes,
Any Looney Tunes? What was your favorite cereal?
Frosted Flakes,
What was your favorite, childhood toy?
a microphone.
Oh my gosh, really? But,
Yeah.
we ain't had them kind of microphones like they got now, child. We
Yeah, no, it
all
wasn't
wire
no, and it
connected.
was a hairbrush for a long time until I asked for, like, a
I didn't have a
microphone.
microphone. I had to record into my Teddy Ruxpin because I didn't have I'm trying to think of another question. What was your favorite, school subject growing up?
Reading.
Reading? I can see that. I can
Yeah.
I can see that. Well, Erin, one of the reasons, like I said, I wanted you to come on because I just have great conversations with my friends, and it's almost like I
Yeah.
try to be a fly on the wall in our conversations. But like I said, we might have to come back and do a part 2 on relationships or something. I don't know.
I love that.
But this has been very, very powerful. I know that there are so many people out there that have struggled with trauma, with grief,
Yeah.
with all types of stuff. What if you were to say one thing to our audience about just like anything that's helped you on your journey, what would you tell them?
This is words of wisdom from like when you're looking at life through anxiety goggles is what I call it. It's always distorted and it's always bigger and scarier than what it actually is. It
Mm,
makes you progress to this worst part. So in the words of my Uncle Jim, my late Uncle Jimmy Wilkins and my cousins, I have to tell them I gave Uncle Jimmy a shout out so they can watch it. But he said it can't eat you. Like it can't whatever you think it is that is just so unmanageable or I can't make it through this, or whatever, it's never as big as we think,
yeah.
that it is, even when it is harrowing and awful. There is some glimpse. If you are alive and you have breath in your body, there is some kind of way that you can get through this.
Yeah.
And we just have to, work through our stuff to be able to ask for help if that's what we need. Because that was a big struggle of mine. But, facing these things on your own, it is tough. But if get that village, you can do it. And you really can do all things. You can navigate hard things.
One thing too, I just want to, one more message because that was a powerful
Uh,
Uncle Jimmy, shout out to you. It can't eat you. I'm stealing that. I just want you to know, right?
yeah.
But second, because we'll probably air this around your mom's death anniversary and Mother's Day.
Yeah.
What is a message you have for those that are going to be without their mom during that time?
Okay. Um, I just always tell people grief is so individual. Like how I handle my grief and how my siblings handle theirs completely different. And you need to do what works for you. If it is a day where you can't, and you don't want to be out and about or whatever, don't, like find some people to be with. Sometimes and there's a difference between isolation and solitude. So solitude is cool, but isolation and then prolonging that is not good for you.
Yeah.
So whatever you need to do, to get through that, do that. But like even now, like start thinking about it, getting acquainted with what you're gonna do so that when the day gets here, don't avoid it until the day of and then you're like caught out there, because I had some holidays like that where there were some days where I could go and do something commemorative, and then there were some days that I was like, I can't, I don't have it in me. I'm tired. So yeah, do what works for you and take it one day at a time
Yeah.
because you don't unlove or unfeel somebody who you loved for any period of time when and the love was deep too.
Hmm.
You don't get over that in a holiday or whatever the case. And you may have 3 good Mother's Days, and then that 4th one might put you in the nose, like, you just don't ever know, so it's just always about being in tune with how you're feeling. If you're feeling weepy and you know that's normally not you, spending some time in that difficult space and,
Just feel what you
go with the
feel.
ebbs and
And
flows of it. I mean, it's 20 years, Micah. And like this morning, I talked to one of my friends from high school, and that death still can pull that, like, that kind of cry out of me, like, without question. And it's not even, I'm not over it or I'm not accepting or whatever. It's just sometimes that 24-year-old pops up and
I don't think it's fair to even
know,
say you're going to ever get over it. I think that's a fair thing when people say, I'm sorry, I'm still working through it, or like that. The apologies are not necessary. Saying you're working
right,
is not necessary because it happened. So you can't ever say that you're never going to have those moments. So I agree.
sure.
To feel what you feel, let it flow, and give yourself grace.
Mhm.
Right? There is no right or wrong way to grieve. Give yourself the grace to know that whatever you're doing in that moment is what you needed to do. You know?
Exactly. Yep.
So I just want to thank you for coming to the playground. Like I say, we can crank this up and start all over again.
And that's so funny, the playground, girl, because my mom was a daycare teacher. And it's just like,
Yeah,
when I think about her and those kids and they loved her, like,
playground.
I have people now that feels like, I love your mama so much. I miss your mama so much. And she was doing sub therapy with people who had struggled with abuse, girl. Like,
Same.
I was like, oh my
All
God,
that.
girl. Like,
But the playground is where people come and
yeah,
different races, attitudes. You had to go regardless of who you were in school. You had to go regardless. So everybody meets at the playground. So thank you again for listening and tuning in, and thank you, Erin, again for being a guest on the show and sharing. This is a special episode. We wanted to really just to honor, the mothers that have passed, the mothers that are here, just mothers and mothering in general. So happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Happy Mother's Day to our heavenly mothers. Happy Mother's Day to our spiritual mothers. Happy Mother's Day to godmothers, aunties, all of the above, okay? And thank you again for tuning in. Y'all have a blessed and wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us on another adventure through the world of big inner child energy. If today's episode resonated with you, don't forget to hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google. Or you can find us on YouTube. Share the love by leaving a review and connect with us on Instagram or Facebook at Big Inner Child Energy. Remember, your inner child holds the keys to authenticity and potential. Until next time, keep embracing your big inner child energy, and may your journey be filled with laughter, growth, and rediscovery of the joy within. This is Big Rick, the imaginary friend of all friends, signing off. Stay authentic, stay curious, and keep revealing the glow within.